How can healing your past transform your relationships and break cycles of generational trauma? Tammy Cox, a trauma healer and a mother of three, shares her deeply personal journey of confronting childhood trauma sparked by parenthood. Through her coaching, Tammy uses hypnosis to help clients release emotional ties to painful memories, fostering profound transformation. She highlights the importance of self healing for improving relationships and setting healthy boundaries even when it challenges family dynamics. Tammy also extends an invitation to explore her podcast and offers discovery calls for those ready to begin their healing journey.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? Maria Romano here at True Love Knots, where I like to bring to you some valuable information to transform your life, and not just your love life, but your life in general, because that's what it's all about. It's loving life and loving yourself and loving those around you. So today I have a fabulous guest on, and she's fabulous. Wait till you meet her. And she comes to you all the way from next door to me in Arizona. As everybody knows, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I want to welcome Tammy Cox, woo-hoo, to this platform.
What an introduction, Maria. I'm so flattered.
Oh,
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. So I didn't share with anybody yet what we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about transformation. We're going to talk about the two T's. Right? Trauma and transformation. And the reason I had decided to bring Tammy on is we all of us have experienced something in life that has impacted us and live with us for the rest of our lives. And I think that's a choice that we make. You've all heard of that verbiage, what you say has a life. It really does. Sometimes what you do and what you experience has a life and stays with you for the rest of your life. And that's important, especially when it comes to relationships. And not just relationships, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, but also in other parts of your world, whether it's your family, your friends, your coworkers, just people that you're interacting with. So that's why I was so thrilled to have Tammy come on. She reached out to me. So Tammy, tell us a little bit about you and how you got involved in this type of coaching.
Oh, gosh. Loaded question. So yeah, I'm a mom of three. I've been with my husband 18 years. And I'd have to say that pivotal changing moment for me was when I had my first child. And I looked at this perfect little being and I realized, oh my gosh, if I don't heal me, I'm just going to pass on all these wounds onto her. It was that realization. And when I became a mom is when all my triggers started going off. They all started sounding because it was then that I realized I had so much trauma that I had not even looked back on or began to touch. And so that sort of led me on my journey. I was on my journey a long time, but I went through every single modality that I heard about. Like I did it all. The books, the therapies, the counseling, the religion, the prayer, all of it. I did it all, and it would help a little bit, and then things would go back to the way that they were. So it really took me digging in. I had to really start healing my trauma. Neutralizing it is what we call it in my line of work. And I had to systematically go through and neutralize the trauma of my childhood because it was kind of ruining my life. So that's kind of the short version. We can go anywhere from there. We can go back into my childhood. That's, a lot of people are interested in the trauma itself that I experienced. But yeah, take it wherever you want.
Well, first of all, you mentioned something. You said when you became a parent and when you had your first child. So I think it's great that you recognize that you didn't want to pass on this generational trauma. I mean, that's the key thing, first of all, with anything that we have in life. We want to pass on the best legacy as possible. And you're right. I think when we have children as women, okay, not that, men, you don't experience the same thing that women do. All of our hormones are even raging. And then we have mentally I think it just brings out so many different things. We talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome. We talk about postpartum blues, right? Things like that. And I think that when you're responsible for a life, it changes you.
Mm.
So if you'd like to share a little bit about your trauma, if you're comfortable with it,
Yeah.
obviously you are, so that maybe somebody can relate that's listening.
Yeah. And there's so many levels, right? As I work with these different ladies, I see like there's religious trauma. There is obviously abuse, some of the obvious ones, which is what I went through. I grew up in a house where it was very controlled environment, very religious, very strict, this little bubble around us. And I was not free to be what I wanted to be. I had to conform to this certain way. And if I didn't abide, then there was physical violence, right? And so when you grow up with that, you kind of learn how to, what I learned was how to manipulate my situation. Um, so yeah, my father was a violent man, but also my house was just violent. There was fighting, physical violence on a daily basis. It was so normal for me. Um, so 11 is when my world kind of turned upside down, because that's when I found out um, that my father got really sick, and my parents sat us down and said, your dad's dying. He has AIDS. And I had no idea of my father's past, of everything that he'd gone through, of everything that he brought upon us. But, you know, uh, he probably had it while my mom conceived all three of us. So really, it was this miracle that we all made it, and then also just processing. So then a month later, he dies. I am very torn between feeling the relief because he scared me so much, and then feeling guilty for the relief, and then wrestling with myself. So I spent my teenagers just so angry and confused and asking myself the deep questions that we don't typically ask till, we're adults. But I had that. So I just dipped down into these really low suicidal points. And when I look back, I don't even know how I made it out because I was in just so much pain. But yes, on the moment when I had my child, all that old stuff that hadn't been dealt with, it all started bubbling to the surface.
I could just only imagine how you felt about that. And I don't know how many years ago, when your dad told you about AIDS, years ago, because when we did first hear about it, now I'm older than you. I've got grandkids. I'm in my 60s. At the time, AIDS was known as the type of disease you got, unfortunately, because you were having relationships with the same gender, basically meant to. So
Yeah.
now that doesn't necessarily mean that today, because look at Magic Johnson, right? Doesn't matter. Your mother. I mean, thank God you're having children. We're not talking about just, passing, HSV2. That's like nothing compared to HIV. So that must have just, thank God you're here, you're able to talk,
Yeah.
and you dodged the bullet.
I mean, yeah, before I even knew it, right? I mean, we all have a purpose in this life, and I believe I believe our trauma those are our gifts. And I also choose to believe, even on a deeper level, that we come in having already chose those major terrible things. I believe we pick it ahead of time. And I think I chose a more difficult path for myself this time around because I really wanted to. I mean, this is what I get to do because I learned how to heal myself. And so I feel it to be such a great gift and an honor to have gone through it so that I can have that much compassion for these women that I work with that have gone through so much worse. Like I can hold that space and they know that someone's there who's gone through some rough stuff. Sometimes when you have someone you're working with and they just have not been through any bit of the pain you have, it's really like a mismatch. It's really hard to have that compassion. But I can hold that compassion for these women and what they go through, because of my pain.
Well, it's interesting because what you're talking about is you learned how to heal yourself. You're right. You can have the best therapist in the world. You can go through the best programs, right?
Mhm.
You can find religion, and I think religion's great. Don't misunderstand me. It's you yourself. It's within you. That's your purpose. And like I said in the beginning, we're the most qualified to teach what we've experienced in life.
Mm.
And that's your gift to be able to help individuals go through that in particular. So obviously somewhere along the line, well, how did you meet your husband? I mean, how did you get through?
Um,
I shouldn't say partner, maybe partner. I don't mean,
no, he's my husband.
yes.
Okay. Well, okay. So in my line of work, we have something called commands. And commands are basically the most deeply rooted negative beliefs on your track. It's something that you've come up with very early on in life, and it follows you all the way through, right? Until you pass on. So mine around men, because I had a father that was, violent and that scared me. My beliefs around men were men hurt me, men are scary, men are violent. And I think there was one around men leave me too, but that one wasn't as deeply coded. So obviously with these beliefs around men, just imagine the kind of men I attracted before I started my healing journey, right? Men that were not so nice to me, right? Because I didn't have that value for myself. So, but when I married really young initially, and I married a prototype of my dad, um, manipulative, deceitful. My dad cheated on my mom, um, up until I don't know when, but um, so I had all these ideas about men, and I married that prototype the first time, and it didn't last very long. He cheated on me the whole time. It was only a year and a half, and he just treated me awful. And then he's like, "Bye," which was a gift too. But because of that experience, I knew very much what I wanted. So I met my husband a year after that guy exited, and he's perfect for me. A gentle, beautiful, loving man, but very opposite of the men, the prototype of my dad. But here's the thing. I became the prototype of my dad. So this is where we have to really understand ourselves is like we pass on the patterns until we shift them. So we become typically either a prototype of our mom or our dad if we were raised by them. And so for me, I had to work on those, the toxic parts of me. So healing me. And that's probably the hardest thing was just my toxicity that I brought in, my misalignment. So those were the things I had to work on. But yes, my husband is a very gentle, kind. He's like the perfect guy for me, for my tender little self.
Now you're your tender little self. I'm sure you're feisty. Something tells me behind that glare, those eyes, that something tells me you're still But
Very feisty.
but that's great. You were able to break that.
Yeah.
And not
Well, I mean, I was determined to. It was not easy. It's still not easy. It's still so deeply part of my programming. It is really about my awareness and my desire to be the new identity that I've created for myself, that it is just like a constant choice for me, a constant reprogramming of myself. So I will not sit here and say it was easy. There are still very strong parts of me that have lasted. So,
Well, it's almost, have you ever heard of the term foreclosure identity, where you have an identity and you're trying to move through it? Okay, move past it. And I think we're always trying to foreclose and shut that door so that you can move forward. And I think it's interesting. So, how did you come about coaching and your transformational coaching? If you could share with us a bit about what you're actually doing to help not yourself and others.
yeah. On my journey, I've worked with lots of different modalities, and now what I do is kind of like it's sort of pieces of all those different modalities that I learned, but it is a form of hypnosis. I believe that the greatest healing work of this time is hypnosis because you're bypassing the conscious mind. You're really working with the subconscious. And I believe that that is the only way to really shift the identity, which is where all the beliefs are held. And so I do a form of that, not sleeping hypnosis. I don't put anyone into they're fully awake, fully alert, but I have a process in which I quiet the conscious mind so I can really work with the inner child, within that person. That's where I like to start because those first 5 years, that's where the identity is formed, is in the first 5 years. So I like to work with that child first before we get into the adult stuff.
Interesting. So you take people back into their childhood.
Yeah, we literally go back there. It's sort of like this. It's called neutralizing the trauma. And what we do, so when you're in a traumatic event, a high state of negative emotion, what happens is a belief gets stamped right there on the subconscious mind. It's attached to an emotion. So when I'm taking someone through a process, we're looking to take the emotional tag out of it, like this. So that way it could just be an event, completely neutral. Like I have no feelings. I could just watch the event like I'm watching a movie, but I have no emotional tie to it anymore. And so when you do this with all the events, what happens is imagine if all the pain trapped in your body is just eliminated bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. What happens is we have like all this free space in our body, all the dis-ease being eliminated. You can create whatever you want from that freed up space, right? So that's really the work that I do.
Now, how do people find you? I mean, how do they come to you? How do women come to you?
Mostly through social media I mean, I've run ads in the past. I actually run ads for my podcast. But most of the people I've worked with is social media or word of mouth.
And you also mentioned that when you have your podcast or your YouTube, that you take people through a journey, correct? Maybe share a little bit about what's different about your podcast.
Yeah, what's different is that it's not a conversation like you and I are having now. It's not an interview form. It's not anything like that. It is someone who is struggling. They're either struggling to find love or they're struggling within their relationship. And so they come on and I just sort of get an idea. Okay, where have been your big blockers in your life? And we, identify, okay, this is the pattern. And then we follow that pattern all the way back. I say, take me to the very first time you felt this emotion. And they bring up on the screen of their mind the first time they felt the emotion. And if they've done some inner work, usually they'll take me all the way back to childhood. If they haven't done any inner work and they got lots of blocks around their heart, they might take me to a horrific event in their adulthood. But either way, they're taking me to an event where they associate this emotion to. And so then we work on it from there to pull all the pain out of that event.
Amazing. Now, you said when you started this that you recognized that you had emotional trauma that was trickling down when you became a parent. Boys, girls, tell us a little bit about your family today.
You want me to tell you about my family today?
Yeah, your daughter. How do you feel you're doing? If they give you a report card,
Depends on which one you ask.
DK, right? I mean, I don't know. Listen, my daughter she would have failed me a few times. That's okay.
Yeah, so I have 3 daughters.
God's bless you.
16, I know. 16, 14, and 6.
Oh my.
And yeah. So that's fun. No, we laugh about who my before healing was. We laugh about the old me and how strict I was and controlling, right? We laugh about that now. So obviously we've come a long way. We've come a long way. I have really beautiful relationships with all my kids now. Number 2 is going through some stuff.
Well, they do.
And also there's the personality stuff, but as a whole, it's just night and day. Having started my healing journey, it's night and day in every single relationship I have. Now, for those who are embarking upon their healing journey, it's very normal for a lot of relationships to fall away because, they're no longer in alignment. And that's what happened to me. New, beautiful relationships came along, and every relationship that stuck got better and better and better because I healed me. Right.
And I think that's what we're always doing is healing ourselves. And we come into this self-realization about who we are. And, you talk about the old parent versus like the new, the new you versus the old you. And sometimes we're just very controlling and we don't realize. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being controlling as a parent, especially when your children are young. You want to watch out for them. But when you get to the point where we recognize that, it's just getting to be a little too much, which leads me to, and you're talking about that certain relationships fall away, correct? When you're going healing. Do you have any siblings that you keep in touch with, or how does that work for you? Well, because this is something that people go through. Do you cut them off? Do you understand them a little differently?
Yeah, for sure. Boundaries are so important. It is. So my oldest sister, she's developmentally delayed. So, she don't play with a full deck, girl. She's in a level 4. Like I said, we grew up in a very hostile environment. My sister never, because of her disability, she never grew out of the violence. So she's been arrested several times. I couldn't really trust her around my kids, especially when they were young. Now my kids don't want to be around her at all. She's very awkward. I have a brother who's younger than me, so the 3 of us are from my dad. Then after my dad died, my mom remarried, and I have a half brother who's 14 years younger than me. But yeah, the relationships are interesting, because we've all chosen our own journeys. Like I'd say that my brother has really stuck to that. Um, it's not the same religion, but that very harsh religious mindset. So it's hard understanding each other, I would say. We see each other, like for Christmas and events, but no, the healing has not been on my end really what I wanted. I would love to be closer, but I have to respect where everyone's at, and I do. But yeah, that's kind of where it's at. So what I tell my clients is you got to do what serves you. You will know whether someone is a good fit for you by how you feel when you're with them. And blood or not, I know that's just programming. Like blood or not, it does not matter to me. What matters to me is, do you add to my life? Do you add to my children's life? If it's a yes, then great. But if it's not, there's going to be some boundaries there because my energy is the most important, most valuable thing that I have. And, there's so that being said, my rule of thumb is if someone's serving you, keep them around. If they're serving you not as much, limit the contact. And if there's just no good that they add to your life, then you really got to rethink whether or not they should have stock in you, because you are a divine being who is worthy of having your cup filled and not pouring into everyone else and getting depleted constantly.
And I love that because, coming into the holidays, sometimes we're coming in contact with people that don't make us feel good, but because we feel obligated. And I was listening to a great podcast the other day, Mel Robbins, and she talked about 2 things, TNA, time and attention, right? You just said it. If somebody doesn't serve you, do you want to spend time with them? And you're giving them your attention and vice versa. And I think that makes a big difference. And that's great advice. And especially coming in the holidays and sometimes just setting your boundaries. And you want to walk away feeling good. And I know myself, if I'm around somebody that doesn't make me feel good, I don't feel good. And it's
Yeah.
you have to just stop. And you really need to pay attention. Go with your gut is so important.
Yeah, and the family of origin thing too. It's like when you come back in contact with someone who knew you as your old self, they're going to call that person to you. and not your current self. And so that's why when I moved out here, it was this beautiful opportunity for me to have enough separation to create the new identity. Not that I couldn't have done it there, but it's held that space a little bit easier for me to really be able to create from a clear plate and not draw back those, like, because every time you're going back to your family of origin, they're pulling from you
Oh,
your
absolutely.
old self. So that's what I had to be very careful of on certain points of my journey, is that I didn't get sucked back into my old ways of being.
Right. There's triggers, and that's so true. First of all, I can't believe our time's like, oh my gosh, we have been chatting away over here. Can you tell us anything coming up, anything you want to share with our listeners before we go? What you'd like, anything you want to share with them?
Yeah. So if you are interested in, dipping your toes in the water, I'm always looking for people to come on the podcast and take them through a process. Of inner child healing. So that's my invitation. Also, I'll set you up with my link tree, that also, if anyone would like to hear more about what it is that I do, they could also book a discovery call with me. So that's all on there. And if you just have a question, a lot of people hit me up for relationship questions. You can either email me, or you can, Instagram is where I am mostly. You could send me a message and I'll respond.
I love that. Well, everybody, I hope you take what Tammy said to heart. And especially if you yourself have gone through any bit of trauma in your life and you just might need some guidance, reach out to her. And more importantly, if you know anybody that might need somebody like Tammy, send them over to her. We're going to put that information in the show notes. I mean, we're coming up to a time of year. It's a time of year where we should all be grateful and at peace and joyful. And sometimes this will also trigger other emotions, which are not the best emotions. And everybody deserves to be happy. Everybody deserves to have love in their life, but everybody deserves to be at peace and not constantly battling themselves. So everyone listening, when you hear this, please, if this is something that resonates with you, reach out to her. Please share this with somebody that you think might be interested. We're here to help each other. And that's what these platforms are all set up, so we can share information and, get the word out there that we're all here to help you. In the meantime, stay healthy, happy, and safe. And as I always say, spread love. Have a great day.